Welcome to She Said Homestead, the podcast that explores homesteading from a range of perspectives. We're Red, Sage, and Mickayla, three homesteaders, each with unique experiences, properties, and future goals for our homesteads.
We're discussing various homesteading topics, sharing our personal experiences as women working full-time who are managing homesteads as well, and shining a light on the stories of other inspiring homesteaders.
Before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy our podcast, please consider leaving a review. It really helps us grow and share these homesteading stories with even more people.
Hey guys, how's it going? We are back for another episode with She Said Homestead. I hope everybody's had a great week. Today we're going to be talking about what is homesteading, the age-old question. So we're going to look at some definitions from the internet that we have found, as well as chatting about what we think of when we think of homesteading and definitions that we have for ourselves, and et cetera, et cetera. Sage, how has your week been?
My week was less eventful than the last time we checked in. I did not find any rogue bulls in the road, so that's good. But it's been pretty chill. I finally stopped procrastinating and made my batch of soap for the year, set that aside to cure. So that's good. And Mickayla and Taylor came by to help me build some raised beds in the front yard. That's really the biggest thing.
We made the trip up to Sage's after a year and a half or so of knowing her, and that was the first time we got to see her property, which was really cool. She gave us a tour. She let us film a little tour for YouTube. That was a really fun day, even though we got a little soggy at first. We cut down some trees. Taylor did the work. We kind of just hung out, but it was fun.
We got drenched and we got covered in sawdust because we were moving logs from the trunks that Taylor was cutting up. And so I was all ready to film videos and then we got rained on and my clothes got muddy and sawdusty and I was like, well, this will be homesteading content for sure now.
I didn't dare take off my hat because my hair would have been like big from the rain, but I got pretty soaked. Otherwise, that was like the main event of the week, I would say, for us. And then we've been kind of winterizing our house a little bit, putting plastic on the really leaky windows and that we talked about last week. And chicken coop work as usual. We just put the roosts in tonight and Taylor got the doors on, so it's completely closed in now.
Nice. How does that feel? Does that feel good?
Very good. It's a relief. We have a little bit of the roosts to put back in tomorrow, and then door handles, and we can put them in there. So I'm excited.
Their chicken mansion.
The chick mansion. Do you guys know what like McMansions are?
Yes.
Like the term McMansion?
Mm-hmm. I've heard it. I don't know. I couldn't define it for someone. I just take it as like American overdoing everything.
I mean, that's basically it. But it's like a term we learn in architecture school at this point. It's like you go through like it's not a suburb, it's a subdivision. You go through like the big subdivisions that have like the big fancy houses and they have brick just on the front. They have like vinyl siding on the sides and the back, and it's just like super fake looking and really, really massive for no reason. And they combine about approximately 12 different architecture styles into one, and it's just like a monster of a house. That's basically the definition.
Wow.
Yeah, we've been calling it the Chick Mansion.
Well, I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
They're going to love it.
Red, how was your week? What did you get up to?
My week has been kind of back to normal. I started a new painting commission and worked a market over the weekend and hung out with my fam. Right now, my income is about half artwork, like traditional artwork, paintings, and things like that. and half tattoos. So I used to be full-time tattooer, part-time artist, like very, very part-time. And now I'm more like solid half and half as far as how I make money. This week is actually, yeah, pretty solidly half and half. Half of the week is working on the commission, and then the other half of the week is working on tattoos.
Okay, so like Red said, we are talking about what is homesteading today. And so we wanted to read you guys what the standard definition from Wikipedia is.
That Mickayla takes great offense to.
Hey, we'll get into that. I'm not ready to defend myself yet. Okay, so Wikipedia says, homesteading is a lifestyle of self-sufficiency. It is characterized by subsistence agriculture, home preservation of food, and may also involve the small-scale production of textiles, clothing, and craftwork for household use or sale. Pursued in different ways around the world and in different historical eras, homesteading is generally differentiated from rural village or commune living by isolation of the homestead.
That sounds so bleak. Oh my god. All right, so Mickayla, I want to know what exactly about that description gets you so fired up.
So for me, it's primarily the first sentence where it says, homesteading is a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, period. I am a firm believer that self-sufficiency doesn't exist, and I think community sufficiency is a better term for that. I think, especially on a homestead scale, people should be focusing on interacting with those nearby them, around them, in their local communities and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying like the commune like it mentioned, but just getting to know and recognize and be comfortable around your neighbors, that kind of stuff. It seems to be a more, I don't know what the right word is, like a happier outlook on life in the future rather than how it said isolation. I don't think that aiming for self-sufficiency should be anybody's goal. I think it should be community sufficiency, and that's my take on that.
So from my perspective, I actually don't disagree with you or the definition. So what's so interesting to me is it's the same words on paper, right? But to every person, it's going to mean something slightly different. So when I hear self-sufficiency, I don't interpret that, and maybe it's wrong, but I don't interpret that to mean you can't rely on anybody else for anything. I take that as, a sliding scale, a spectrum. I think it's accurate to say that homesteading is a lifestyle that pursues self-sufficiency. Now, does that mean that you can't ever go to the grocery store? To me, no. Does that mean that you have to grow your own cotton to make your own clothes? No. But if you do take it literally, and some people do, right? Some people do think in order to call yourself a homesteader, you have to do A through Z. Otherwise, you're an imposter or a phony or whatever. So it's interesting that, yes, I totally agree with your explanation of it and when you get into the nitty-gritty of it. But I also don't necessarily disagree because, I am more isolated out here than I was in the city. There is a degree of isolation to it.
Yeah, for me, it's really just the lack of clarity in that. I think that anybody who is newer to this lifestyle or is interested in the lifestyle could take that stark comment of homesteading is a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, period, as not feeling like they can belong in it, or they are never going to be able to achieve that if they're living in an apartment or they only have a half acre or something. I think that could deter people, and I'm just the kind of person who's like, no, everybody come garden. So I think it's more of a lack of clarity there.
Yeah, I feel that, and I feel both of you on this subject. when I look at that first sentence of homesteading is a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, I see two things at the same time. I see the like survivor, aspect of like, okay, you have to be completely off grid and you have to grow all of your food for a whole entire year and, harvest all of the water for your house through rainwater, et cetera, like 100% off grid. And I also see it as, and this, I can see how people would think that. And when I see that sentence, my mind, there's that in my mind. But also, I think my personal definition of that sentence would be more so taking little steps to be less dependent on the sort of large-scale systems that we have found ourselves in, being a little bit less dependent on the grocery store, a little bit more creative in the kitchen, a little bit more like able to help my little community. Like, for instance, getting eggs for the first time. I don't even eat eggs, but y'all, it gives me so much joy to be able to share my eggs with my friends and my family and my community members that do eat eggs and do enjoy eggs. Like, that is so much fun to me. And so I like see both of the definitions at the same time, even. And I think for me personally, I have this like constant tension between like wanting to push against the self-sufficiency of like the survivor person and wanting to either portray or like embody the more community aspect of it, if that makes any sense at all. Like, I want to have like open arms to all of the people and be like, no, come on, be self-sufficient together. We can do it. Rather than you have to live off grid entirely, blah, 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 Does that make sense? Yeah. Is anything I'm saying making sense at all?
I totally,
absolutely.
Honestly, I think the way that you're saying it, less dependent, is a better term than plainly self-sufficient. I think that encompasses both sides of that, where, you don't have to go live in a jungle in Costa Rica and build your homestead out of jungle wood. But you can also want to grow your own loofahs and make all your own sponges for the year and soap or candles or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes I look at my life in like the long timeline of my life. And I see these times where, like currently, I'm living on a homestead where I own 5 acres of land and I have geese and ducks and guineas. I've built a coop for them. I do the daily chores. I have a little garden, all of these things. But when I look at the long timeline of my life, to be honest, there are times when I look back and I'm like, actually, maybe I was more of a homesteader at this point in my life when I lived in the city and I did these other things that I'm not currently doing. Or maybe I was more of a homesteader when I was a kid and we were doing XYZ things that I'm not currently doing as a homesteader. And at those times in my life, those times previously, I wouldn't have called myself a homesteader as I do now. So I think it can be a fluid concept, and you can be a big time homesteader and not consider yourself a homesteader, or you can consider yourself a homesteader when you're not doing like all of the things and you're not farming on a large scale.
I've definitely had conversations with people where essentially what they were saying is, I find it so annoying that these people call themselves homesteaders when all they have is a garden and chickens. And that makes me so sad That makes me so sad that we, as a community, as a society, whatever, put this expectation of you have to meet this bar in order to be this person. Like you have to work this hard in order to be this thing. You have to meet whatever. And it's so exclusionary.
I feel like that happens a lot with, especially, I guess it's related to homesteading too, but I feel like that sort of strictness comes in a lot with when you're talking about diets, like people's diets and what they perceive as, like, I guess plant-based. I think that's probably why the term plant-based came into circulation, because people were having a hard time distinguishing what vegan or vegetarian meant. And I guess, like, there's carnivore and stuff too. So I think it's, to me, it's a very personal thing. And I think that not the diet thing, but homesteading in general is a very personal thing. And it's hard to say, no, you're not allowed to call yourself that, because why not? Like, if it makes somebody happy and they're working towards a goal, why, like, who are you to tell them that they're not that person, you know?
Exactly. That's the biggest thing for me is who are you to tell someone else how to live their life, or that they're not living their life correctly, or that you know better than they do in terms of what they can and can't call themselves or their lifestyle.
Right. It's interesting too. I think about the artist community. It can be that way as well. I would say, generally speaking, I find more so that there are like lots of pro artists, people who make a full-time living off of art. There are more of us who are like, no, it doesn't matter if you are full-time or not. Like, if you are just starting to paint, if you are drawing little doodles in your sketchbook every day, you can still call yourself an artist. It's more so us saying that as opposed to gatekeeping, but there are still a lot of artists who gatekeep in that way, and they're like, you can't call yourself an artist unless you're full-time, and it's simply not, it's just not true. So it's interesting that we're having this conversation about homesteading, because I feel like there are so many different like subgenres of like communities who deal with the same gatekeeping, exclusionary issues. And it's extra interesting to me that it is happening with homesteading, because it's, I mean, those people who feel exclusionary, who feel those exclusionary feelings, what is their bar? What is their standard? What boxes does one need to check in order to be considered a homesteader to them? And that's going to be different with everybody. So how can you define it?
Yeah, I think at least my perception of where that comes from, and gatekeeping is exactly the word that I was looking for, and I didn't know I was looking for it. But that my perspective of when that gatekeeping comes in is, I had to jump all these hurdles. I had to go through all of this stuff. I had to suffer through all of these things. And therefore, you do too, in order to quote unquote earn it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's where it comes from. And that's not constructive or helpful at all.
Right. Yeah, like, I suffered, so you have to suffer. And I suffered this amount, therefore you also have to suffer this amount in order for me to feel like we are equals, perhaps?
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate. And I do feel like there are certain areas of life in which that mindset is extremely necessary. Surgeons, for instance. You do not want a surgeon who's just like, oh, I'm just going to try it out and not go to school and not be certified. Like, obviously, that bar needs to be set. But when it comes to something that is a lifestyle or a hobby, and it doesn't affect other people's health, then no.
Okay, so in terms of the whole artist thing that you were just saying, where you can consider yourself an artist, this isn't where I saw this conversation going, but I'm going to bring it there. So I think that a lot of the reason that homesteading relates to that exact conversation is, at least for me personally, it's a huge creative outlet for me. Like, I can do I bake a lot. I get to try new foods with the stuff that I'm growing. I get to design my garden. That's like, it's constantly creating things. So I think that's interesting, like an interesting relationship. It's creating and being an artist in a different way, I feel like. And also the topic of you have to suffer because I had to suffer, that's literally the first thing and the thing you hear repeatedly drilled into your head in architecture school. That has been said to me so many times, and it's actually turned into a legal issue with architecture interns, because they work you so hard and they don't pay you. So that's actually a big issue in like the internship world. Just not that that's relevant to this, but it made me think of it.
That's interesting too, because that's a big thing in the tattooing world. Now, tattooing is one of those things where I think, while this is a definitely touchy subject, and it's got a lot of like little details to it that we should not go into on this podcast, but just only because of the health aspect of tattooing, because it is like a tiny little surgery, like that is a field in which you want to go to somebody who is trained in aseptic technique, who has the training in order to do that process, that procedure safely, right? Now, it gets sticky because within the tattoo industry, there's a lot of stuff that I won't go into, but all of that to say, that is one of those areas where, like, yes, there needs to be a little bit of gatekeeping just in terms of keeping the general public safe. However, once you get into it, there is so much of that as well, Mickayla. Like, I suffered, so you have to suffer. Like, you know, an apprentice should literally be abused in some way, shape, or form for the entirety of their apprenticeship, etc. And it's like,
it's so common. Yeah. It's like super common, I feel like, in a lot of industries. But I will say that's another thing, you don't think about this health-wise, but it is a health and safety thing. I can't legally call myself an architect. It's against the law. I can barely call myself an architectural designer. That's kind of, it's a gray area still. They haven't defined that. I think technically the term, which annoys the hell out of me, the term is technically graduate of architecture until you become a licensed architect, which doesn't take into account any of the years of work you've put in after you graduate. So it bothers me. But technically, there's that level of safety there too, like health and safety, where you have to put in X amount of hours before you can have the privilege of calling yourself this title.
Totally.
So I think, like, in a lot of different instances, that's there. But
question on that front, to tie it into homesteading, if someone is growing food on their homestead with the intent to sell it to the general public or making bread, do you guys feel like there needs to be a level of gatekeeping or certification or some degree of training?
I feel like that would fall into cottage laws, I guess. I don't know. I don't even know what North Carolina's cottage laws are or if they have them, but I've considered that too, because I'm like, well, I can make bread, I can make any food items, but like the thought of selling them freaks me out because I don't know if you have to have certain criteria for that. So I don't have an answer to that.
The only thing I know, because I do sell eggs off of my homestead is that you can't sell basically the equivalent of more than 1 dozen eggs a day. Like you can't sell more than 30 dozen in a month. And they don't have to be washed, but they have to be clean. You can't call them organic. Like I have to call my chickens organic fed pastured hens. I can't call the eggs organic. I can tell you how I feed the hens and how I treat them, but I can't label the eggs.
They can't be graded either, right? Or they, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff with North Carolina egg law that I had to look up to be able to confidently be able to sell eggs.
I'm not sure about all of South Carolina's cottage laws. I know that we have cottage laws for like baked goods and things if you're going to sell them. And I did look up selling eggs at a market. And with us, you have to wash them with bleach in order to sell them at like a farmer's market. You don't have to do that if you sell them from like a farm stand at your house. However, that is the extent of what I know. I did not go any farther than that. There might be other details that are listed in there that I just didn't research. And that is a really interesting conversation too, because I think about that a lot. Even when I just grow my own food for me to eat it, we've had a couple of issues with our gardens, like our garden locations. And I've thought about it a lot as well because of like wanting to nourish the soil with our duck and goose poop, right? Fertilizer. But I also want to do that in a safe way where it's still safe for me to consume the food. So I've thought about these kinds of things a lot. I've done a lot of research with that. And sometimes I will still come to a point where I'm like, I'll like feel weird about like washing my produce, and I'll be like, oh, I want to make sure I like really, really wash it well, or should I wash it with soap and all of these things? And then I catch myself and I'm like, wait a second. I'm like way overthinking this washing process or this, whatever I'm doing with my food that I have grown. And yet when I bring something home from the grocery store that has had all kinds of chemicals and pesticides, and it's been on a truck and it's been through countless folks' hands who, like, I don't know where it's been. I don't know what it's gone through to get to my house. And I'm like super flippant about washing that food. So it's like, okay, that's just a really interesting conversation. I'm not going to say that there's like a right or wrong answer to any of that. I think ultimately, personally, when I am ready to have a farm stand, or if I'm ever ready to take my food to the farmer's market, I'm going to follow the cottage law to do what I need to do there. I probably won't bring my eggs to a farmer's market because I don't feel good about bleaching them personally.
No, that's terrible.
Right. And ultimately, I'm going to do whatever I feel I can to bring my community things that I would eat, things that I would consume, right? Like if I'm not going to consume it, why in the world would I give it to my friends and family? If I'm not going to give it to my friends and family, why in the world would I give it to somebody else? So,
right.
Maybe in that vein, it's a matter of trusting your fellow community members. When I go to the farmer's market, I trust them,
I'm curious what both of your experiences were when you decided, okay, I'm going to buy some land, I'm going to turn it into a homestead. When you told other people that you were homesteading, what were their reactions and what did they think that meant?
Good question.
Because I know when I started to tell people that I was going to go homestead, for whatever reason, people really latched onto the idea of farmers markets and market gardening and thought that I was just going to grow a bunch of lettuce. My whole property was just going to be lettuce, and then I was going to go sell it down at the farmer's market. And I don't really have a desire. Market gardening is its own thing entirely, but especially when homesteading is just not something that people necessarily even know what that means. I just thought it was comical that I was making this life change, and people, even when I told them, had no idea what it meant.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think so. For me, it was a mixed bag because before we moved here to this, like, honestly, dream homestead situation, before we moved here, we lived in a city, and there were definitely people who kind of gave us the side eye a little bit, like, oh, really? Okay, is everything all right? What are you doing? You're gonna go try and live off grid? You're gonna go be a little house on the prairie, or that kind of thing. There were folks who didn't understand, or who even felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable with the idea. But there was a very few number of those people, and they were people that didn't know us very well. People who knew us very well, I come from the punk community, which is a very DIY community, which embodies in one way or another some of those homesteading principles already. So there were a lot of folks who were like, oh yeah, you're going to go just, bake bread in a different place, or you're going to go have a big garden, like we already had gardens in the city. And then people who have known me for a very long time were like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, because they know my history and they know that I come from a place of like growing up animal husbandry and small scale gardening and that kind of stuff. So it was a mixed bag, but it was very much dependent on how well the person already knew us. So
I would say the exact same thing for me. It's a mixed bag. I think like my few closest friends, a couple of them are very into the same sorts of things. Like they love, I'm thinking of one in particular, loves cooking, loves making bread, would love to move onto my property and have a house 10 feet away from me and we could share the land, that kind of deal. The other ones were just excited that like we were doing what we want to do, where we want to go, and that they could potentially get garlic from me. And then I guess my family, I'm sure that they just expect the craziest things from me because I've moved 13 times since I graduated high school 9 years ago. So they never know what we're doing, and I don't even know that they like keep up with it anymore because they can't keep track of what we're doing now because we're just ridiculous. My mom like watches all of our videos and stuff, but I don't know that if it surprised them or not. And then I would say in general, our bigger friend group, like Taylor's friends and like the overall friend group, not like my couple closest friends, they probably think we're wacko. Like I don't know. They're probably like, oh cool, what do you, they don't have any concept. They all live in Detroit, so I think
when I started telling family, they genuinely were worried that I was just having a breakdown. I was having a crisis, that I was going to do this and get 6 months into it and be like, never mind, help me get out of this. I think I kind of blindsided them with it because I wasn't incredibly open about me finding it and getting really interested in it. I kind of just kept it to myself and then did, in their perspective, a 180 with my life.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, not with my family, but with a couple of people that I know being like, wait a second, huh? And it was just because I hadn't kept up with them in that way, you know, or they didn't know me from a long, long time ago. I also had a couple friends who were like, oh my God, I'm so excited for you. I wish I could do that. Please take me with you, that kind of thing. And that surprised me. Weirdly enough, there were a handful of friends that I was really nervous to tell them. I was nervous that they were going to be uncomfortable with the idea of me moving, and I was expecting it to be an awkward conversation. And instead, they were like, oh, yes, please let me go. Take me with you. So yeah, mixed bag.
On that note, Red, at what point in time did you consider yourself a homesteader where you were starting to tell people we're going to go be homesteaders?
I think that for me was maybe even after we moved. Because I personally, because of my background, I had my own hangups with calling myself a homesteader, and I felt nervous to call myself a homesteader. And so even though I wanted to do all of the homesteading activities and projects, I, even still to this day, it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable calling myself a homesteader because of my own personal background. But I think I've started being more open about that when we moved, like once we had actually moved. What about you, Mickayla? When did you start calling yourself a homesteader?
Okay, so I got really, really into gardening and homestead YouTube back in 2020 when we moved back to Michigan. And I was like, this is it. I need to start a garden. I got obsessed, like ADHD, hyperfixation, obsessed with it. And I was like, okay, I live in Metro Detroit in my friend's bedroom, and I'm a homesteader. So I pretty much accepted that from that point on. I was like, I'm doing it. I have to go all in on hobbies and things. And this is one where I knew I liked it from childhood, where I loved having gardens and plants and all that kind of stuff. And I accepted it and rolled with it ever since. And it's working out so far. So it's been, I guess, 3 years. But yeah, we literally lived with our friend. And I had a landscape bed to garden in, and that was the first time I ever gardened by myself as an adult. And even as a kid, we gardened with Miracle-Gro like 3 years, and we never picked anything. We just planted it. So that was, yeah.
What about you, Sage?
For me, there are two distinct bookmarks. There's the first one, which is when I knew that I wanted to be a homesteader, but didn't at that moment feel like I was. Mm-hmm. And when I felt like I could actually call myself a homesteader. So I distinctly remember the moment where, at this point, I had consumed a bunch of Justin Rhodes and Roots and Refuge. Like, those were my go-to. I later expanded into things like Sow the Land and the Haulers. But I was at my kitchen table working from home because everybody had been sent home because of the world circumstances. And I was sitting there watching this video content being like, oh my gosh, I just want this lifestyle so bad. But I hadn't said it out loud. And I sent a message to one of my friends, and I was like, am I crazy for wanting to just go buy like 5 acres and some bees? Like, have I lost it? Like, is this just some sort of weird COVID crisis, or am I good? And that's saying it out loud, even in such a nonchalant way, right? I was like, I want that. I want that really, really bad. So that was when I knew that I wanted to become a homesteader. And then in terms of when I actually felt like a homesteader, when I could confidently call myself that, was not when I got the land, not when I moved here, but when the first chickens laid their first eggs, and it was only 2 of them, but I was like, this is it. I'm a homesteader now.
I can confirm that I also felt officially like a homesteader when we first got our eggs a couple weeks ago. I was like, yep.
First egg day is a big deal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially when you get them from chicks. I feel like it's the process. You've done it. You've gotten the egg.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mention like watching the YouTube channels because, and I think this might tie into kind of what Red was saying about not feeling comfortable about calling yourself a homesteader. When I first started watching the homestead YouTube and the garden YouTube, I was looking for plant-based homesteads because I was vegetarian. And so I found Sunshine Farm and I watched all her videos and I was like obsessed with her farm and homestead or whatever. And then I found Jess at like Roots and Refuge and I watched the gardening videos. I wasn't really into like the homestead stuff from that perspective because they were more focused on meat animals and that kind of stuff. So it's just interesting that, I don't know, YouTube in 2020 was definitely the gateway drug to homesteading, I think.
And now we're both YouTubers.
I know. Gateway to YouTube and homesteading.
I want to hear more about when you were, living in in a spare room and you had decided that you were a homesteader, but you didn't have land yet. What were you doing in that moment to really embrace that?
So I was still in school and I was, again, watching all those YouTube videos literally like while I was doing homework, and I bought a bunch of seeds. So that was in 2020 of the summertime. And I bought a ton of seeds over the winter. I planned my little garden out. Adam had our friend, he had a little landscaping bed and it's like a triangle shape, but it was probably 9 by 9 by 9-ish. And I loaded that thing up. I grew flowers and sunflowers and a bunch of herbs and a bunch of catnip because we had a bunch of cats at the time living there. So I kind of started out with the gardening aspect of it, but getting into watching more of those videos, I was like, I need to learn how to can. So I bought a water bath canner and I got peaches from Walmart, not even local peaches or anything. I was like, I'm going to probably mess this up. So we're going to do it with Walmart peaches. And I canned Walmart peaches for the first time. I then got a pressure canner too. And I was like, I'm going to go all out. We're doing it. Canning corn. And the reason I chose those 2 things is because those are 2 canned, like home canned foods I had as a child at my best friend's grandma's house. Like she canned those things. Whenever we'd go there, we'd have homemade bread with butter and then she'd serve us like chicken or something with mashed potatoes, corn, and then peaches for dessert. So I was like, this is my childhood. And it was really, really cool to learn those skills. And if you guys saw how much I canned this year, it was a ridiculous amount. So
yeah, well, what I thought was cool about what you canned this year was, I mean, it's your first year at the homestead. You're still working on building your garden, but a lot of that was purchased from the Salvage grocery store at a discount, and then you put up that food, and it's shelf stable now, or it's in the freezer. And I mean, you have a homestead now, but even though you have the land and you have the garden, you're still not obligated to harvest it from your own place, right? Like that doesn't exclude you from still doing these things that you were doing when you were turning your waiting room into a classroom.
Exactly. And I think like for us specifically, the Salvage store comes in when we need the money saved elsewhere to do other projects on the homestead to get our homestead going. So we get the discount stuff. And we're still learning how to can the things and being able to kind of hone in on what canned food we like and what frozen food we like. And I get to practice the techniques, practice how much we eat per year, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm looking forward to even though we're still having to buy a lot of that stuff before we grow it. Yeah, I think anybody could do that. I don't know if Salvage stores exist everywhere. I didn't have one near me in Detroit, but it's like 5 minutes away, and it's dangerously close to me now.
Yeah. When I see your Instagram stories and you're like, I bought like 800 pounds of strawberries for $2, I'm like, I need a store like that near me. And maybe there is one and I just don't know about it. I don't know the right people to ask. But the only thing I know about is a day-old bread store, but I make all my own bread, so.
There's at least 2 others on the way to Asheville from us, so there might be more up there.
Nice.
Well, if there's a really good deal, tell me and I'll make a trip.
If there's a really good deal, it gets sold out fast. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because they don't have
just snatch it and I'll Venmo you.
Can do. Next time there's strawberries. Was there anything that you guys did while you were still like pre-homestead property, when you were preparing yourself to move to the property, or just ahead of time? Did you try to learn any of the skills like before?
For me, what I got the most preoccupied with, worried with, was the animal aspect. Because not only am I new to farm animals, but like I didn't even have a dog growing up. And so keeping animals alive, I was very worried about because I just wasn't practiced at it. And having things like chickens that I've never even been around before. I mean, yes, I understand the general concept. They need food and water, but it's the things that you don't know that really worried me. And so I spent a lot of time researching and just kind of like you were saying earlier, almost obsessively learning because with me there is no land of in between. I am all in or I am all out. And so that's what I spent most of my time doing when I was consciously preparing. And honestly, a lot of that was going back to old school Justin Rhodes stuff where he was showing his everyday and he was like, this is how you take care of turkeys. This is how you take care of Cornish cross. And just absorbing as much information as I possibly could.
Nice.
Red, what about you?
There were a handful of things. I had like potted plants on the back deck kind of thing. We didn't have a yard really. I mean, it was like gravel and trash basically. And so I did some potted plants. I attempted to grow some cucumbers and tomatoes. They did not do very well because we just did not get a lot of sun back there. In years past, I did the exact opposite. I grew some tomatoes in like a bucket, but they had too much sun and they like literally fried in several weeks. They like got big and then they just toast. They just fried.
Oh, that's so sad.
It was sad. I just gave up at that point. I didn't grow anything for a while after that. So I did some potted plant kind of stuff with varying levels of success, but I didn't let that stop me. And then I also, I was one of those people in 2020 that started baking their own bread. And that's something that I had did a lot of baking when I was a kid. And I just forgot how much I loved it. And so I got really into the sourdough thing, and I've been baking sourdough about once a week ever since. And I think honestly for me, that was about it. It was very minimal stuff, but I was kind of like you, Sage. I knew I wanted to go big or go home with it. And at that point, we also knew that we had wanted to move. So we moved from Richmond to South Carolina to be closer to my family. And, so if it was like, okay, well, if we're going to move to be closer to family and we want to do this, like we knew for sure we wanted to do homesteading on a larger scale than we currently were in the city. It was like, all right, well, we're just going to learn as much as we possibly can, read as much as we possibly can, brush up on as many skills as we can, and then we're just going to jump into it.
the go big or go home aspect of things for all of us makes me, that feels right, and that feels why we're doing this podcast. We're all here because of that. we're not going to do things small. We have to homestead, video it, and talk about it on a podcast.
Do we all have ADHD? Because that would make a lot of sense. Okay, self-diagnosed, but firmly believe.
Very much.
Okay. I honestly think that ADHD might be one of the like essential ingredients, if you will, to like enjoying homesteading, because there is a degree of routine to it, but every day is different. You get to do whatever you want. It's this huge creative outlet and you get to work with your hands all the time. Like this energy gets to go somewhere. At least for me.
Seasonality, because you know what to expect seasonally, but it's constantly changing throughout the year. So like you don't have to be focused on the same thing all year, but you know what to expect at the same time next year. That's what it is. And there's so many ways you can do it. You don't have to do it somebody else's way. You can make up your own way and just do it that way. So I think that's a huge part of it, honestly.
Yeah. I was thinking about that with gardening too. There's this element of like things to look forward to that really feels nice to my ADHD. It's like, and each part of that something to look forward to, there's a task. So it's like, okay, now we're going to look up the seeds, and there's hope that we're gonna get the seeds, and then they come in, and then you can plant the seeds, and then they pop up. Oh, exciting. It's like there's always something like a new serotonin boost or whatever. Is it serotonin? It's a serotonin boost that we look for, right?
I think ADHD seeks dopamine hits.
Yes. Constant dopamine hit, because there's always something exciting coming.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in the craft, like shopping for crafts is a completely different hobby than actually doing a craft, and I feel the same way about garden planning. Garden planning is my winter activity. Am I going to use it in the spring? Potentially, but the gardening is its own separate thing. It just keeps me happy in the winter, and that's all that matters.
Yes. I mean, it's almost time to start thinking about what needs to get put into soil blocks, which is terrifying to me. Like there's things that I need to start almost January 1st. And at the time of this recording, that's a couple weeks away.
At the time of this recording, I also still haven't planted my garlic, and it's December. So
Mickayla.
I'm building a chicken coop, okay? We'll get there. We'll get planted.
We still have time. We're far enough south. We still have time.
Yeah, I think both of you are warmer than I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
We're 8A now, technically.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. I mean, I'm close to Asheville, but I'm up in elevation, and my first frost date is a solid month before Asheville's, and my last frost is a solid month after.
Wow.
I live like on a mountain. Not on the top of a mountain, but on the side of a mountain. Mickayla can attest to the elevation on my homestead.
I slept so well after I was at her house. It's a lot of walking up the hill. So I guess to encourage everyone else who might want to call themselves a homesteader or isn't sure if they should call themselves a homesteader, we should chat about different ways you can turn your waiting room into a classroom, learn skills before you have a homestead, that kind of stuff. Like I started out by learning canning, by learning gardening. Sage, you researched a bunch of stuff. What else did you do?
Yeah, and it wasn't even necessarily homestead related, but certainly related to removing myself from dependency on the larger systems for just general products. Like I learned to make soap, I learned to make lotion, just the general do it yourself instead of having to buy everything from the store. And I didn't do that with the intent of thinking, oh, this is going to make me more of a homesteader. But it's along the same mindset. And when I think about it, it is motivated from the same place. And you can definitely do that if you're waiting on land or have no intention of buying, a huge property, but still want to remove yourself from the systems where it makes sense to.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things you can do. For instance, in an apartment setting, let's say you don't even have a balcony where you could grow food. Like in my instance, I tried and failed because I didn't have enough sun exposure for plants, for those types of plants. In that case, I was baking bread. I could have done what Sage did as well, and I could have learned how to make soap or lotion. You can learn how to make things with like yarn and whatnot. So like crocheting or knitting, get a sewing machine and learn how to either make your own clothes, which is super cool. Anybody who can do that, or learn how to just fix your clothes. That's a super helpful skill. Canning, like Mickayla did. And Sage, you had talked previously before we even jumped on here to record about implementing alternative ways of gathering energy. So like doing smaller off-grid sorts of things. If you're able to, you could harvest rainwater. And maybe you don't even use the rainwater for your own home. There's a whole system in which people need to harvest the rainwater and then filter it so that it's safe to, say, like drink or whatnot. But you could use that for even your houseplants. Even that would be very cool, to use rainwater to water your houseplants or whatnot.
I know a lot of people in the Asheville area specifically go and seek out spring water instead of drinking the city water. And if that's something you're interested in, you could totally go spend a Saturday hunting down different sorts of springs and safe places to harvest water from, if that's what you're into.
I think the entire premise of this podcast episode and our podcast in general is doing things your own way. So calling yourself a homesteader, even if you don't have land, we fully support that. At least I do. I think that we want to encourage people to learn skills, and I mean, not for doomsday's sake, but more just to have the skills, take things into your own hands, because it's fun. At least we find it fun, and it's often a creative outlet, which we talked a lot about in this episode. So I think that would be a really great driving factor, to have a creative outlet, not just growing all your own food.
I'm not going to speak for anyone else either, but I totally agree with you, Mickayla. Like, I very much desire this podcast to be a place where anybody can come and learn stuff and get inspiration to try new things. I mean, I'm going to be inspired to try new things just from this chat and from hearing people's stories. And I very much want everybody to feel like they can call themselves a homesteader if that is what they desire.
Absolutely. Our intention is not to gatekeep. Our intention is to welcome everyone who wants to be here with open arms.
We just want to encourage you guys to get on this train, because it's really a cool journey to be on. We want to say that you can do this if you still have debt, if you are still working a full-time job, if you're working multiple jobs, if you live on a tiny little lot somewhere or in an apartment. If you're doing this alone, you can do so much. You're capable of so much. So if this is something you guys are interested in doing, we fully support you and encourage you to go for it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of She Said Homestead. We hope you enjoyed our chat. before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Send your homesteading stories to us at shesaidhomestead@gmail.com. We can't wait to share them on the air.
To stay connected, follow us on Instagram for updates and sneak peeks at what's coming up next. If you like video podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the She Said Homestead YouTube channel too.
We can't thank you enough for being part of the She Said Homestead community. Until next time, happy homesteading.